You know, when he was Vivek was on our show last week before, and he did a little rapping. He said, you know, my name's Vivek. It rhymes with cake, so maybe that's his nickname.
Yeah, and
Cake Man.
You know, the rapping, and if you watch some of his campaign ads, he uses music that really appeals to the Gen Zers. So we're going to have a panel of Gen Zers. We'll ask them what they think about him. He can relate to, I feel like, every age.
Yeah. Oh, so it's interesting. So we've just given you a lot of information. This essentially is the starting point before the big debate, and you'll see the big debate a week from now right here on Fox and all of the Fox platforms. But, you know, when you look at the power rankings, and Griff made it clear that that's different than the polling. The polling numbers we just showed you were among Republican primary voters. But the power rankings, which our staff puts together, it looks at all the early state polls, the field operations that each of the teams has, the national polling, and the fundraising. And that is where Tim Scott is doing very well. He's still a distant third, but he's got a solid foundation in the early states. His fundraising, see, this is the power rankings. Trump is way ahead. DeSantis is the closest contender, but in third place, you got Tim Scott. Tim Scott, with his fundraising, has had 53,000 unique donors, and 30% of his donations in the first half were under $200. So the small dollar donors are flocking to Tim Scott, which is a good sign.
They're also flocking to Donald Trump, too,
right,
aren't they?
But it shows you exactly, you've got a lot of grassroots support.
Yep.
Here's what blows me away. That Joe Biden beats just about every Republican by 1 or 2 points within the margin of error.
All of them.
And if you watch his press conferences, his callous way in which he's treating the people of Hawaii, if you see the fact he doesn't sit down and talk to anybody, the policies he's putting out there, laughing at the fact that he duped us with the wrong title for his economic plan that jammed 1.4 trillion down our throat and then told us it's all about green energy and giggled about it. He still has 1 or 2 points above the Republican contenders. But you know who's holding strong? Robert F. Kennedy with 46% favorability rating, but he's still holding on to under 20%, which is a lot closer than most Republicans are to Donald Trump.
Well, in this poll regarding Joe Biden's core supporters, he is preferred by women, black voters, people with a college degree, younger voters, and he's got a double-digit lead with Hispanics, except against Trump. And that number is down to 9. He leads Trump by 9 with Hispanics. But keep in mind, in 2020, Joe Biden won the Hispanic vote by 28. So there's a problem there, and look for the White House to try to fix that.
But the margin of error for the choice for president, when they asked who's your choice for president, Biden got 44%, Trump got 41%. Margin of error is plus or minus 3, so
right.
They could be neck and neck. When asked about, because we've been talking about Vivek Ramaswamy and his popularity recently, when asked who do you prefer, your choice for president, if you had to vote right now, Joe Biden versus Vivek Ramaswamy, and out of all of the voters, 42% said Biden and 38% said Vivek, so that's
right.
Pretty close.
But Ainsley, look at the bottom number, and those are the people
I was going to say that. Yes.
Those are the people who picked the president. Among independents, if you were voting right now, 30% would take Vivek over Democrat Joe Biden.
And that's the number you really have to look at, because all the Democrats, of course, are going to choose Joe Biden. Look at that number. The Republicans are going to choose
right.
Vivek. The independents, who really could go either way, the majority of them want Vivek Ramaswamy.
You know what's so interesting, too, is that I think the whole key is, if you want to be the Republican nominee and beat Donald Trump, is to do that and not alienate Donald Trump voters. He seems to have the perfect message. He's half Donald Trump's age, so he could go out and say, listen, this guy he captured my imagination. That's the one who inspired me, not Barack Obama and not George Bush or Mitt Romney. And number 2 is, I like everything he did. I want him to be my mentor when I'm president. Here's Vivek Ramaswamy showing how good he is on his feet, taking a controversial issue like women transitioning, LGBTQ rights, and just took it on head on. Watch.
I was just wondering what your views on same-sex couples.
I don't have a negative view of same-sex couples. I believe that we live in a country where free adults should be free to dress how they want, behave how they want. That's fine. But you don't become oppressive by foisting that on others. And that especially includes kids, because kids aren't the same as adults.
What's really happened, Sean, is we have a tyranny of the minority in this country. I refuse to say that somehow changes the language we use, changes how women compete in sports, changes which bathrooms people use, and let alone change the way we indoctrinate our children. No, I stand against that kind of tyranny, and I will do it with civility. I will do it with respect for every human being.
So I think that's what's so impressive about him, because the way he's so brilliant, he's, Ivy League educated. And when he responded to the individual who asked him, how do you feel about transgender? How do you feel about same-sex marriage or LGBT, who identified as pan? He was talking to that individual, and he says, I don't have a negative view on same-sex couples, but I do have a negative view on tyranny of the minority. And you think, what does that mean? And he goes on to explain, I don't think somebody who's religious should be forced to officiate a wedding that they disagree with, or a woman who's worked hard for her achievements should be forced to swim against a biological male. That's not freedom, that's oppression.
I think the debates on Fox next Thursday night, I think that's going to, so many people are going to see Vivek for the first time in this new light about how he is surging in the polls, and now people are interested in hearing what he has to say. And if Donald Trump chooses not to show up, there's going to be a lot more about the other candidates, and I wouldn't be surprised. We know a lot about Ron DeSantis. We know a lot about Tim Scott. He's been on the program a million times as well. Vivek's been on, but a lot of, the people watching haven't seen him. I bet my prediction is Vivek could actually be the breakout star of the debate.
I think you might be right. And how about what he said? He said, look, they've all done this before. They've all debated before. I've never done this. This is going to be my first time. He said the first debate is not the end. It's just the beginning. So this will be something of a warm-up for me. So just warning all of us, if I don't do great, this is just a warm-up for me. But he says, I'm not over-preparing for this.
Right. And he's a guy who's actually done something. He's built a business. He's made hundreds of millions of dollars. He's created so many jobs. A lot of people want to hear what he has to say.
I also think it's important to find out if the front runner is going to show up, and then how that changes tactics if he does, and if he doesn't. So maybe he possibly turns himself in, which he's got to do before the 25th and the 23rd.
You mean turn himself into to Martha and Brett?
First he has to go for Atlanta, Fulton County,
Georgia,
and then maybe
Friday.
He decides to show up and change the narrative.
Do you think he'll participate?
What
are you hearing?
If it wasn't for this turning yourself in before the 25th, I thought
which is Friday, the day after the debate.
So I'm thinking if he's going to do it, maybe he decides I'm going to do it. You take your mugshot, you take your fingerprints, and then I'm going to show up, and then you decide where you stand on my 4 indictments and what happened today and the 18 others that had to do the same thing. So either way, he's going to be a dominant force at the debate.
Well, he's already said, he hadn't made up his mind. He's already said the second debate, which is going to be on Fox Business, which is going to be out at the Ronald Reagan Library in California. He's already said, I don't like the guy who runs that, so I'm probably not going to go to that debate. So if he doesn't show up for the first 2 debates, people are going to go, why isn't he? Is he afraid of something?
Right now,
why
he's in a good spot
up?
because Republicans feel sorry for him, because they feel like he's the only one that's going to stand up against the injustice that's happening, the 2-tiered justice system. So I think a lot of Republicans are supporting him now, and that's why he's doing well in the polls.
But
I think if he doesn't show up for the
everybody
debate,
else,
people might
go
say,
shopping.
Yeah, might take offense to that.
There's a few things that happened over the last few days, events that are noteworthy. One of which how President Biden decided to leave Afghanistan, one of the biggest travesties in American military history. We marked that. The president ignored that, believe it or not. But he did not ignore the anniversary of the passing of the Inflation Reduction Act, which he came out and said, by the way, it's mislabeled. I never should have called it that.
Right.
Just like we sat on these chairs and on the couch and talked about this, what does this have to do with inflation? So it's time for them to mark the economic impact, which is the spending programs 1 year later.
Right. And extraordinarily, and the interesting thing is when they had the signing of this bill at the White House a year ago, Nancy Pelosi could not get people to clap. And she channeled her inner Jeb Bush. Remember in 2016 when Jeb Bush said, please clap? Well, Nancy Pelosi said, hey, that's an applause line. She said that a year ago, and then yesterday at the White House, she had to do it again because apparently she just wasn't whipping up the crowd. See if you would clap after Nancy Pelosi says this.
We can all agree we have a moral obligation to ensure strong, healthy, resilient communities for future generations. I think that's an applause line. Many of the recommendations now in the law, including clean energy tax credits, were present in that legislation. You know that, Mr. Markey, because you did a similar thing in the earlier Congress. Thank you for your leadership. That's an applause line.
They need one of those applause signs like they've got on sitcoms. Boo, 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 laugh.
Right. A lot of spending, a lot of green energy, and
not
we're
much
on
applauding.
the hook. Right, and we're on the hook for a lot of it, and the president thinks he can run on it. The guy that's up in the air riding the High Wire Act is Joe Manchin. Without him, that doesn't pass. He did not show up. He feels as though it's not living up to its hype.
Well, he signed it, and now we are all stuck with it.
Right.
Unfortunately.
14 minutes now after the
That's
hour.
our A block. Please clap.
All right.
Just because you said so, I will.
Thank you.
All right.
I'm Steve Ducey.
I'm Brian Kilmeade.
And I'm Ainsley Earhart. And click here to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page to catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis.